My reflection in the tailor's mirror was that of a stranger. At 67, I had long grown accustomed to practical work clothes. For decades, I'd favored durable trousers and flannel shirts, attire suited for a garage, not for display. But on this day, I stood before the mirror in a charcoal grey suit with tasteful cufflinks that cost more than my typical clothing budget for half a year. The young man assisting me smiled, smoothing the lapels. "It's a perfect fit, Mr. Nathan. The color really brings out the authority in your posture." I gave a slight nod, unaccustomed to such praise. Today, however, I wanted to accept it. I was, after all, getting ready for the wedding of my only daughter. Elara would be marrying her Julian in 2 weeks, and despite the distance between us, I wished to appear dignified. "I'll take it," I announced, moving back to the changing room. While the assistant handled the transaction, I gazed out at the bustling Wilmington streets. It felt peculiar that in my long life, I had never truly left this town. It was here I launched my first auto repair shop, here I said goodbye to my wife, here I raised my daughter. Now, Elara was getting married, perhaps the final significant event in my life that warranted staying in Wilmington. After paying, I left the store with the suit bag in hand. My old pickup truck was waiting in the car park. As I settled into the driver's seat, I checked my watch. It was 2 in the afternoon. I had a 3 o'clock meeting with the wedding planners. The office of Pearl Weddings was in a sleek new business center. A polite young man named Carl ushered me into a conference room. "Mr. Nathan, we have all the documents you asked for," he said, arranging folders on the table. "Are you certain you wish for your involvement to remain confidential?" I nodded firmly. This had been my condition from the very start. "Yes. Elara and Julian must not know I'm covering the majority of the costs. They believe the groom's parents are handling everything." Carl's expression was one of puzzlement, a reaction I anticipated. It was an unusual request. "It's just that my daughter and I have a complicated relationship," I offered, though I owed him no explanation. "She wouldn't take the money from me directly. She believes it would diminish her standing with her fiancé." I left out the full story, how after my wife passed away 16 years ago, I built a business and raised a daughter on my own. I didn't mention how Elara grew ashamed of her working-class roots in college, or how she drifted further away, considering me too unrefined for her sophisticated new life. And I certainly didn't mention how, after I sold my chain of garages 5 years ago for a considerable sum, her interest in me was suddenly, suspiciously, rekindled. "Everything will be kept private, just as we discussed," Carl reassured me. "Here is the paperwork for the venue, catering, photographer, and so on." I examined every page. The total was staggering, over $80,000, but I could manage it. Elara was my only child, and despite our troubles, I wanted her wedding to be magnificent. "You understand that if there's a cancellation less than a week out, we cannot issue a full refund, correct?" Carl asked, passing me a pen. "I understand," I said as I signed the last page. "But nobody is going to cancel the wedding at that moment." I had no inkling of the profound irony those words would soon hold. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. In all that time, Elara never once called me, never inquired if I would be at the ceremony. I never received a formal invitation, but I convinced myself it was a simple oversight. Surely, a daughter invites her own father to her wedding. The morning of the event was bright and sunny. I rose early, took a long shower, and carefully styled my hair, still thick but entirely silver. I donned my new suit and put on a light cologne. The gift, a check for a generous amount to fund their honeymoon, was placed in a handsome envelope. The Belvedere Hotel, the most opulent venue in Wilmington, was where the ceremony would be held. I parked my old truck among a sea of luxury cars and felt a brief flicker of self-doubt. Perhaps I should have taken a taxi. But no, that was foolish. I had always been a practical man. The hotel lobby buzzed with activity. Guests in fine attire chatted in small groups, their laughter echoing in the grand space. I scanned the crowd for a familiar face, but most were strangers, likely friends and family of Julian's. "Grandpa," a cheerful voice cried out. I turned to see Leo, my 22-year-old grandson from Ilara's first marriage, running toward me. He was tall and slim, with my blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. Leo was the only one who consistently stayed in touch. "You made it," he exclaimed, giving me a tight hug. "I'm so happy. I was worried you might not come because of..." He trailed off, but I understood. Because of my strained connection with Ilara. How could I miss my own daughter's wedding? I smiled. "You look very handsome." My boy Leo, dressed in a sharp groomsman suit, adjusted his tie. "Come on, I'll introduce you around," he offered. Just then, Ilara approached us. My daughter looked tense, despite the festive occasion. At 42, she was still a striking woman, slender and impeccably dressed, her hair professionally styled. Her eyes, an exact replica of her late mother's, regarded me with poorly hidden annoyance. "Dad," she said, her tone conveying disbelief. "What are you doing here?" Her greeting caught me off guard. "I came to your wedding, of course." Ilara glanced around nervously before taking my elbow and guiding me away from the other guests. "Listen," she started, her voice low but firm. "I thought we were clear about this. You're not on the guest list." I stared at her, utterly bewildered. We hadn't discussed anything of the sort. "What are you talking about, Ilara? How could I not be invited to my own daughter's wedding?" She sighed, adopting the expression of someone explaining the obvious to a child. "Dad, this is an exclusive event. Julian's parents are here, they're friends, our colleagues." She hesitated, searching for the right words. "I just don't think you would be comfortable here." In that instant, it became painfully clear. She hadn't just forgotten to invite me, she had intentionally excluded me. I, the man who had built a business with his bare hands, was not suitable for the elite company her new family kept. "You're ashamed of me," I stated, the words tasting like ash. "No, of course not," Ilara replied too quickly, her eyes betraying the lie. "It's just that Julian is very particular about everything being perfect. His parents have invested a lot of money, Anne. And you don't want your blue-collar dad spoiling the picture," I finished for her. "Dad, don't start," she snapped, her voice laced with irritation. "I'm just asking you to understand. We can get together after the honeymoon, just us." At that moment, Julian joined us. He was a handsome man in his late 30s, polished from head to toe in a designer tuxedo. His face held an expression of polite inquiry. "Ilara, darling, is everything all right?" he asked, his gaze assessing me coolly. "Yes, everything's fine," she responded. Dad was just leaving. Julian offered a tight, artificial smile. "Oh, Mr. Nathan. What a pity you couldn't make the ceremony." Perhaps another time he spoke as if my presence was a fleeting interruption, as if I were a mere acquaintance who had dropped by unannounced. I looked at Ilara, hoping she would step in, say something to defend me. But she stood silent, avoiding my eyes. "I'm sorry, but you weren't invited," she finally whispered. "Please go." I felt a sting behind my eyes, but I refused to let tears fall. Not here. For years, I had excused her neglect, pretending everything was fine. But today, something inside me shattered. "As you wish," I nodded, maintaining my composure. "Congratulations to you both." I turned to walk away, but Leo grabbed my arm. "Grandpa, please don't go," he pleaded, his own eyes welling with tears. I gently patted his hand. "It's all right, son. Call me tomorrow." I walked toward the exit, feeling the eyes of the guests upon me. As I stepped out of the hotel, the bright sun felt like a mockery. I walked to my truck on unsteady legs. For several minutes, I just sat, trying to process the raw humiliation. Then, I opened my glove compartment, took out my phone, and checked the time. The ceremony was scheduled to begin in 40 minutes. The reception was at 7. All of it, paid for by me. I looked at the gift envelope still on the passenger seat. Slowly, I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving my daughter to celebrate the start of a new life, a life that clearly had no room for her father. The drive home felt interminable. My mind was a chaotic loop of her words, * you weren't invited. Dad was just leaving. An exclusive event * each phrase was a fresh blow. 67 years I had lived, only to be cast out of my own daughter's wedding like an unwanted stranger. My quiet street, with its familiar maple trees and well-kept houses, offered a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I parked in my driveway but couldn't bring myself to get out of the truck. It was as if remaining in the cab could postpone the final acceptance of what had just occurred. Finally, I forced myself out and walked up to the porch. Inside, the house where I had spent most of my adult life felt cavernous and hostile. My gaze fell upon the photographs on the mantelpiece, Ilara as a little girl with a gap-toothed grin, Ilara as a teenager, proud in her soccer uniform, Ilara at her college graduation. In every picture, her smile was directed at me. When had it all soured? At what point did I become an embarrassment to her? I picked up a photo of my late wife, Clara, and me, holding a tiny Ilara at the beach. We looked so happy, so ordinary. What would you say about this, Clara? I whispered, tracing my wife's smiling face. What would you say to our daughter? But Clara had been gone for 16 years, taken by a sudden illness when Ilara was 26. Back then, my daughter still loved me, still visited every weekend, still wasn't ashamed of where she came from. I placed the frame back on the mantel and sank into my armchair. Clara and I had started our first garage together. When she passed, the entire burden fell on me. Yet, I not only managed, but I expanded the business into a chain of 7 successful auto shops across Wilmington. I had supported Ilara through everything, a down payment on her first apartment, her first wedding to Leo's father, the legal fees for their divorce, Leo's private school tuition, and bailing her out of debt more than once. I was always her safety net, both emotionally and financially. But as the years went on, her career in finance and her desire to ascend the social ladder created an unbridgeable gulf between us. When I decided to sell the business 5 years ago, Ilara's interest in my life suddenly surged. I wasn't naive, I knew her concern was tied to the proceeds from the sale. The final amount was impressive, $2,300,000. After buying a more reliable truck and remodeling the house, I invested the rest. Ilara, upon learning the sum, had presented me with a brilliant business plan, wanting me to invest in a risky venture of one of her friends. I refused. She called me old-fashioned. We argued, and her visits dwindled. When she announced her engagement to Julian 8 months ago, I had been genuinely happy, hoping this new chapter might heal our rift. A foolish old man's dream. The ringing of my phone pulled me from my thoughts. It was my personal manager from the bank, a weekly courtesy call for clients with significant accounts. Mr. Nathan, good afternoon, Rebecca's cheerful voice came through the line. Just calling to check if everything is in order with your accounts. I was silent for a moment, staring at the clock. The ceremony would have started by now. Ilara and Julian were exchanging vows. In less than 2 hours, the grand banquet would begin, a lavish affair for 120 guests, all paid for by me. Mr. Nathan? Are you there? Rebecca asked, a hint of concern in her voice. Yes, sorry, I cleared my throat. I have a question, Rebecca. If I wanted to cancel payments scheduled to go through in the next few hours, is that possible? Technically, yes, if they haven't been finalized. What payments are we discussing? I pulled up an email from the wedding agency. I read her the list of vendors: the Belvedere Hotel, Golden Leaf Catering, Jameson's Photography Studio, Rosemary Flower Salon. With each name, a cold determination solidified within me. These are significant amounts, Mr. Nathan, Rebecca said, clearly taken aback. May I ask the reason? They were for my daughter's wedding, I explained. But there have been unforeseen circumstances. I want to cancel all of them. Immediately. I understand, Rebecca said carefully. But I must advise you, there may be penalties for cancellation. I'm prepared for any penalties, I cut in. Please, do what's necessary. I could hear the faint sound of her typing. Okay, I see the payments. Most are scheduled for tomorrow, so we can stop them. I'll contact the back office right away, thank you, Rebecca. One more thing, an idea, clear and sharp, had formed. I'd like to open a trust account in the name of my grandson, Leo Nathan. I want to transfer those funds there, of course, Mr. Nathan. We can certainly arrange that. After we discussed the details, I felt a strange lightness. For the first time in a long while, I had acted decisively, refusing to be a silent, invisible wallet. My next call was to the wedding agency. Carl answered. Pearl Weddings, how may I help you? Hello, Carl. This is Nathan. Oh, Mr. Nathan, he sounded surprised. The wedding is underway. Is there something you need? I'm calling to inform you that I am cancelling all payments related to the wedding. A confused silence, then an uncertain laugh. I'm sorry, what? You must be joking. No, Carl. I've just been on the phone with my bank. All transactions are being stopped, but that's impossible. His voice trembled. The ceremony is happening now. The banquet starts in an hour. You can't just. I can, I stated firmly. And I have. Mr. Nathan, please, what happened? Let's talk this through. The solution is that the payments have been cancelled, Carl, but the vendors. The venue. This will be a catastrophe. Panic was evident in his voice now. Not my problem. I could almost feel him scrambling for a response. Okay, I have to inform the bride and groom. Go right ahead, I replied evenly. Tell them their sponsor has withdrawn his funding, but they think the groom's parents paid for it. How do I explain this? That's not my concern, I said, pausing for effect. Although, you could just tell them the truth. That the bride's father, who wasn't invited to the wedding, was the one paying for their party. So, my God, Carl mumbled. I had no idea. Well, now you do. Good day, Carl. I ended the call and set the phone down. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a forgotten sense of empowerment. Suddenly, the phone rang again. It was Leo. I took a breath and answered. Grandpa, my grandson's voice was fraught with worry. Where are you? Why did you leave? Your mother asked me to leave, son, I said. She told me I wasn't invited. What? No. She couldn't have. Yes, Leo. She did. I could hear a commotion in the background. The ceremony must have concluded. That's awful, Grandpa. I'll talk to her. I'll make her apologize. Don't, son, I interrupted gently. Don't ruin your evening. What evening? I could hear the tears in his voice. How can I enjoy myself knowing how you were treated? Grandpa, Leo's voice dropped to a whisper. Something strange is happening. The hotel manager is arguing with Mom and Julian. They look really upset. I remained silent. Rebecca and Carl had moved quickly. The consequences of my decision were already unfolding. Grandpa, are you there? Yes, son. Listen, no matter what happens tonight, remember that I love you. You're scaring me, he said with a nervous laugh. You sound like you're saying goodbye. No, of course not. I just want you to know you can always count on me. I know, Grandpa. I love you. Two voices called for Leo in the background. I have to go, he said quickly. I think there's a problem with the banquet. I'll call you back, of course, son. Go. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. It was done. For the first time in years, I had stopped being an invisible ATM for my daughter and started respecting myself. The phone rang again. Ilara's name flashed on the screen. I watched it vibrate, then fall silent. A text message appeared, *Dad, we need to talk. Urgently. Call me back, *. I turned the phone face down. I had no desire to speak with my daughter. Not today. Leo nervously watched the scene unfold. What was supposed to be his mother's perfect wedding was rapidly devolving into a public spectacle. In a corner of the magnificent banquet hall, his mother, Ilara, and her new husband, Julian, were in a heated argument with the hotel manager. There has to be a mistake, Ilara insisted. her voice sharp. The payments were all confirmed last week. The manager shook his head grimly. Mrs. Thorne, I just received word from finance. The payment has been recalled. We cannot provide services without payment. Julian's parents, an elegant and imposing couple, approached their son. What's the delay? Julian's father, a man named Jeffrey, asked. Why is the champagne not being served? Dad, there's a misunderstanding with the payment, Julian said, his face pale. They're saying it was withdrawn. Jeffrey frowned. Leo watched his mother and Julian exchange a panicked look. Just then, a man with a clipboard from the wedding agency hurried into the hall. Mr. and Mrs. Thorne, he said urgently to the newlyweds. I need a word. Leo, on instinct, moved closer to a large floral arrangement to overhear their hushed, frantic conversation. All payments have been rescinded by the primary sponsor, the planner said. We've contacted the bank, the decision is irreversible, the primary sponsor. Ilara interjected. What are you talking about? Who is that? The planner looked bewildered. Your father, Mrs. Thorne. Mr. Nathan. He covered the vast majority of the wedding expenses, Leo gasped. His grandfather had paid for all this? Ilara's face went from white to a blotchy, furious red. That's absurd. My father paid for nothing. It was all Julian's parents. Jeffrey, hearing his name, stepped closer. What's this, Ilara? Your mother and I only paid for the rehearsal dinner. You told us you were handling the main event. Julian's wife, now ashen, stared at her new husband. Julian, what is he talking about? Leo saw his mother frantically pulling out her phone and dialing. He was sure she was calling his grandfather. Seizing the moment of chaos, Leo slipped out onto the terrace and called the familiar number himself. Grandpa, he asked as soon as Nathan answered. It's a complete disaster here. What is going on? After a moment of silence, his grandfather sighed. I suppose they found out I cancelled the payments, so it's true. Leo whispered. You paid for Mom's wedding? But why was it a secret? Your mother wouldn't have accepted the help directly, son. You know our relationship. She wanted to throw this lavish wedding for Julian, but she couldn't afford it on her own. Leo leaned against the terrace railing. But why did you cancel everything? He asked, though he suspected he already knew. Because your mother threw me out of my own daughter's wedding, Nathan replied plainly. She said I wasn't invited, that I didn't belong at her exclusive event. Leo closed his eyes. He loved his mother, but her pretentiousness could be unbearable. That's horrible, Grandpa. I'm so sorry. It's not about being sorry, Leo. It's about respect. I've supported your mother for years, and all I ever asked for was a little consideration. Through the glass doors, Leo could see the banquet hall descending into chaos. Catering staff were removing floral centerpieces and packing them into boxes. Waiters were clearing away untouched glasses. Guests were whispering, some already getting up to leave. Grandpa, they're dismantling the party, Leo reported. The catering is packing up. The flowers are gone. It's a nightmare. I'm sorry you have to see this, son. Nathan's voice was filled with genuine regret. This was never about hurting you, it's so humiliating for Mom and Julian. All their friends are watching their perfect wedding implode. Sometimes, the hardest lessons are the most necessary, Nathan said quietly. Through the glass, Leo saw his mother, her face contorted with rage, yelling at the catering manager. Julian stood beside her, looking as though he might be sick. Mom is furious, Leo said into the phone. She's shouting at everyone. Your mother never handled adversity well, Nathan sighed. At that moment, Ilara pulled out her phone again. A second later, Leo heard his grandfather's phone buzz on the other end of the line. It's Mom calling you, Leo said. I can see that, Nathan replied. It's the 6th time. I'm not answering. There's no point talking to her when she's like this. The hotel manager was now loudly demanding that all guests vacate the premises if the bill wasn't settled within 30 minutes. Julian's parents looked mortified. You swore you were handling all the costs. Jeffrey bellowed at Ilara. You said your career was thriving, and now we learn your father, a man you didn't even invite, was secretly funding this charade. That's not true. Ilara cried. I had no idea he'd interfered. An interference? Jeffrey scoffed. The only interference here is my son marrying into a family of liars. Julian's wife, who had been standing nearby, finally burst into tears. Julian, please, not here, she sobbed. But it was too late. The drama was now the main event. Grandpa, it's awful, Leo whispered. Julian's father just called Mom a liar in front of everyone. I am sorry to hear that, Nathan replied, and Leo could hear the sincerity in his voice. But your mother made her choice when she decided I wasn't good enough for her new life. Just then, the hotel manager clapped his hands for attention. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice booming. Due to unforeseen financial complications, this event is now concluded. We ask that you please exit the hall within the next 15 minutes. A wave of murmurs swept through the remaining guests. Most began to gather their things, some offering awkward condolences to the newlyweds. Leo watched his mother's mother-in-law run from the hall, sobbing, with Julian's wife right behind her. Ilara stood in the middle of the chaos, looking utterly defeated and humiliated. They've officially cancelled the banquet, Leo told his grandfather. They're kicking everyone out, I understand, Nathan replied. You should go too, son. There's no reason for you to stay. What about Mom? I can't just abandon her like this. You're a good son, Leo. More than she deserves right now. But some people have to face the consequences of their actions alone. Just then, Ilara spotted him and stormed over, her face a mask of fury. Are you talking to him? She seethed, jabbing a finger at the phone. Let me speak to him, Mom. Now is not the time. Give me the phone, she shrieked, holding out her hand. Grandpa, Mom wants to talk to you, Leo said quickly. She's very angry, I can imagine, Nathan replied. Don't give her the phone unless you want to. But before he could decide, Ilara snatched the phone from his hand. Dad, she screamed into it. What in God's name have you done? Do you have any idea what you've done to me? Leo couldn't hear his grandfather's reply, but he saw his mother's expression shift from pure rage to stunned disbelief, then back to fury. How could you? How could you humiliate me in front of everyone? My friends, Julian's parents. The pause. This is completely different. Yes, I didn't put you on the guest list, but that's no reason to sabotage my entire wedding. You did this for revenge, admit it. Another, longer pause. Ilara's face drained of color. No, you don't understand. I can't just pay them now. I don't have that kind of cash. The banks are closed. She listened for another moment, her shoulders slumping. Please, Dad, her voice was now pleading. Reinstate the payments. We can talk about this later. My marriage, my reputation, it's all on the line. She listened again, and then her face twisted with rage. She yelled something unintelligible and thrust the phone back at Leo. He barely caught it. Grandpa, he asked tentatively. Are you there? Yes, son, Nathan's voice was weary but steady. I'm afraid your mother and I couldn't come to an agreement. Leo watched Ilara gesture wildly as she argued with the hotel manager again. I've never seen her like this. She always had a temper, Nathan sighed. Even as a child, I think she's trying to find the money, Leo observed as his mother started frantically making calls. It won't work, Nathan said. It would take $80,000 to cover everything tonight. Your mother doesn't have friends who can loan her that kind of money on a Saturday night. The hall was nearly empty now. Julian returned, his face ashen. He and Ilara began another furious, whispered argument. It looks like their marriage isn't going to make it through its first day, Leo said sadly. If a relationship can't survive its first real test, Nathan said philosophically, it was never that strong to begin with. The manager approached Ilara and Julian one last time, pointing at his watch. They both nodded, shoulders slumped in defeat. We have to leave, Leo said. The manager is insisting. Where are you staying tonight? Nathan asked. I have a room here at the hotel. There was supposed to be a family brunch tomorrow. Good. Stay there. Don't go back to your mother's place tonight. She needs to cool off. Okay, Grandpa. I will then, Leo. Yes? I love you, son. Whatever has happened between your mother and me, it doesn't change how I feel about you. A lump formed in Leo's throat. I love you too, Grandpa. I get why you did it. I really do. They said their goodbyes. The great hall was now empty except for his parents. Ilara was typing furiously on her phone by the exit. Julian had already gone. The wedding that was meant to be the start of a perfect new life was over before it began. Leo walked over to his mother. Mom, he said softly. Let's go. She looked up, and he was struck by the utter despair in her eyes. He ruined everything, she whispered hoarsely. Pure, petty revenge. Leo shook his head. No, Mom. You ruined everything yourself. The moment you kicked your own father out of your wedding. He turned and walked away, leaving his mother to stand alone in the empty hall, surrounded by the debris of her failed celebration. I was jolted awake by a furious pounding on my front door. It was only 7 in the morning. The banging continued, insistent and angry, accompanied by Ilara's voice. Dad, open this door right now. I know you're in there. I rose slowly from bed. After yesterday's turmoil, I felt a peculiar sense of calm. No fear, no second-guessing, just a quiet certainty that I had acted correctly. I put on my robe and went to the door as the pounding intensified. I opened it and stood there, looking at my daughter in silence. She was a wreck. Her suit from yesterday was wrinkled, her hair was a mess, and her eyes were red-rimmed from a sleepless, angry night. You, she hissed, jabbing a finger at my chest as she pushed her way inside. You've ruined my life. I closed the door and turned to face her. Good morning, Ilara, I said evenly. You're up early. Don't you dare, she practically yelled. Don't you stand there and act as if nothing happened. I walked past her toward the kitchen. I was going to need coffee for this. I remember exactly what happened, I said, filling the kettle. You asked me to leave your wedding, so I cancelled the payments I was making for it. You planned this. She followed me, her voice rising. You paid for it all in secret just so you could pull the rug out from under me as revenge. I set the kettle on the stove. No, Ilara. When I made the arrangements 2 months ago, it never occurred to me that you wouldn't invite me. What kind of father assumes such a thing? She was silent for a beat, but quickly regrouped. You should have told me you were paying. It's manipulative to do it behind my back. Would you have taken the money if I'd offered it to you directly? I asked. Ilara looked away. That's beside the point. You humiliated me in front of my friends, in front of Julian's parents. The kettle whistled. I poured the hot water over coffee grounds. Want some? I asked. No, she slammed her fist on the table. I want to know why you did this to me. I sat down with my mug and looked at my daughter. Why did I do it? Why did you kick your own father out of your wedding, Ilara? Why did you say I wasn't invited, that I didn't fit in with your exclusive guests? I wasn't ashamed of you, she mumbled, unconvincingly. It was just, the wedding was for a certain kind of crowd, a crowd your father doesn't belong in, I finished for her. Because I'm a man who worked with his hands his whole life. Because I don't have a fancy degree or high society connections. Because my background embarrasses you. She couldn't find the words to object. It doesn't matter now, she finally waved a hand dismissively. You have to fix this. Fix it. I raised my eyebrows. How? Reinstate the payments, she blurted out. Call the bank, the caterers, everyone. Tell them it was a mistake. I took a sip of my coffee. It's too late, Ilara. The money was returned to my account last night. Then make new payments. She began pacing the kitchen. Julian is beside himself. His parents are threatening to disown him. We had to sleep in a cheap motel because the hotel cancelled our reservation. I watched her, reminded of the little girl who would have tantrums when she didn't get a new toy. Some things never change. Where was your honeymoon supposed to be? I asked. She stopped, suspicious. What does that have to do with anything? A 2-week tour of the Greek islands. The flight was supposed to be tomorrow, and who paid for that trip? She frowned. We did, of course. No, I shook my head. I paid for that, too. It was all part of the same package. Ilara froze, her face slackening with shock. She slowly sank into the chair opposite me. What do you mean, the total package? She whispered. I sighed. $86,400. That's what your wedding and your Greek honeymoon cost, Ilara. And I was paying for all of it. She stared at me, her eyes wide. That's impossible. Where would you get that kind of money? I sold the business 5 years ago, remember? For $2.3 million. I invested most of it. I live on the interest. I can afford to spend a little on my only daughter's wedding. Ilara was stunned into silence. I could see her mind recalibrating everything. Her father, whom she saw as a simple old man with a modest pension, was actually a wealthy man. Why didn't you tell me? She finally asked. Why did you hide that you had money? I didn't hide it, I answered calmly. You never asked. You were only ever interested in what you could get from me. Remember your friend's startup? The one you wanted me to sink $200,000 into. It was a promising venture, she said defensively. Or it could have wiped out the investment. I chose a safer path. Ilara looked bewildered, her anger slowly being replaced by a grudging respect. For a moment, she seemed to see me not just as her father, but as an independent, capable man. That moment didn't last. Her expression shifted to the calculating look I knew so well. Dad, she leaned forward, her voice becoming soft and placating. I understand you were hurt. I was wrong not to invite you. It was a terrible mistake. I waited. I knew this tactic, admit a little fault, then pivot to the demand. But you don't want my marriage to begin with this kind of scandal, do you? Think about Julian. And his parents, they're influential people. They could help us in the future. How could they help an old man like me? I asked with a hint of sarcasm. She missed it completely. Jeffrey has connections everywhere. If you ever needed anything, a top doctor, a spot in the best retirement community. I couldn't help but laugh. A retirement community? Ilara, I'm 67, in perfect health, and have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my days. What do I need with a nursing home? Embarrassed, she quickly changed tack. I was just giving an example. The point is, it would be better for everyone if you just fix this. Pay the money, and we can have another wedding reception. A better one. With you as the guest of honor. I set down my empty cup. No, Ilara. The money for the wedding is gone. The mask of pleasantness vanished. What do you mean, no? You can't just say no. This is my marriage, my reputation. I've already reallocated the funds, I said calmly. They're going toward Leo's education. Ilara froze. What? Last night, I opened a trust fund in Leo's name. $80,000 for his education. College, a master's degree, whatever he wants. He's 22, with his whole life ahead of him. You can't do that, she was outraged. That money was for my wedding. It was for your happiness, I corrected her. But you made it clear your happiness doesn't include me. So, I found a better use for it. Ilara shot up from her chair, her face flushed with rage. You're doing this out of spite. I stood as well, meeting her gaze directly. No, Ilara. I'm doing this because, for the first time in a long time, I've decided to respect myself. For years, I put up with your dismissiveness, your embarrassment, your constant requests for money without a word of thanks. I let you use me, hoping one day you'd see me as more than a bank. But yesterday, you crossed a line. Kicking your own father out of your wedding isn't just disrespectful, it's cruel. And I will not tolerate it anymore. She stood there, breathing heavily, her hands balled into fists. "You will regret this," she seethed. "The only thing I regret," I replied, "is all the years I spent letting you treat me this way. But that's over you." "You," she sputtered, grabbing a clean mug from the counter and hurling it to the floor. "What am I supposed to tell Julian? His parents?" "Tell them the truth," I shrugged. "That you kicked your father out and he withdrew his financial support. Or make something up. You've always been good at that." She turned and stalked toward the door. "I never want to see you again," she yelled, turning back one last time. "You're not my father. You've never been a real father." The words should have pierced me, but instead, I felt only a profound sense of relief. The final, toxic tie that bound us had just been severed. "Goodbye, Ilara," I said quietly. She slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. I heard her truck screech away down the street. I sank into a chair and looked at the broken porcelain on the floor. Our relationship was just as shattered. But instead of sorrow, I felt peace. The ringing of the phone broke the silence. It was Leo. I smiled and answered. Sunlight streamed onto the porch of my new home in Charleston. I sat in a comfortable rocking chair, sipping iced tea and watching the sailboats glide across the harbor. For months had passed since the day of Ilara's disastrous wedding, for months that had completely reordered my life. Selling my house in Wilmington was surprisingly easy, as if destiny itself was urging me forward. Finding a new home took longer, but when I saw this modest but charming house with a porch and a small workshop in a quiet Charleston neighborhood, I knew it was right. My first weeks here were spent setting up my new life. I bought new furniture, new tools for my workshop, new everything. It was a fresh start. I began exploring the city, rediscovering my old love for woodworking and fishing. I even joined a local fishing club. My phone buzzed with a text from Leo. It was a picture of a complex architectural model he had designed. The caption read, "Top of the class. Thanks for making grad school possible, Grandpa." I smiled. After the wedding fiasco, Leo had enrolled in a master's program in architecture, a dream he thought was out of reach. The trust fund had made it possible. Leo was the only person from my past life with whom I maintained regular contact. He had flown down to visit last month, and we had spent the weekend fishing and talking. Inevitably, the conversation turned to Ilara. "Mom is still furious," Leo had said, staring into his coffee cup. "She never mentions you, but if I bring up your name, she just freezes." "That's to be expected," I nodded. "What about her and Julian? Did they ever have a wedding?" Leo made a face. "Yes, if you can call it that. It was pathetic." He described a small, joyless ceremony 3 weeks after the initial attempt. Instead of the grand hotel, a drab restaurant. Instead of 100 guests, 30 of their closest relations. Instead of a live band, a playlist on a laptop. Instead of a Greek honeymoon, a weekend at a local resort. It was so awkward, Leo recalled. Everyone knew about the first wedding. Julian's parents looked like they were at a funeral. Mom smiled the whole time, but it never reached her eyes. And Dad? Dad just looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. I could picture it perfectly. Ilara, who had spent her life cultivating an image of success, must have been mortified. "And you know the worst part?" Leo continued. In his speech, Julian thanked his parents for their financial support. He just lied, right there in front of everyone, pretending they had paid for the whole thing. A classic Julian, I thought. He'd rather tell a lie than admit a truth that made him look weak. "And how is she now?" I asked. "I don't know," Leo shrugged. "They're still together, but something's broken. Julian is always finding fault with her now, like she's indebted to him. And she's lost her confidence. She seems smaller." He sounded sad, and I understood. For all her flaws, she was still his mother. "Has she asked about me?" "No," Leo shook his head. "But he knows we talk. Sometimes when I'm on the phone with you, I see him listening from the other room. I think deep down he misses you, Grandpa." His pride just won't let him admit it. I didn't comment. I was done chasing illusions. If Julian truly missed me, he knew my number. Those memories faded as I returned to the present, to my porch in Charleston. In 3 days, I was leaving for a deep-sea fishing trip in the Gulf of Mexico, a 2-week adventure I had dreamed of for decades. It was a trip Clara and I had always talked about taking someday. Well, someday was finally here. I was finally doing it for me, and for her. After selling the house and buying this new one, I had a considerable amount left, and my investments provided a steady income. I could afford to enjoy my life. My new financial advisor, a sharp young woman named Tara, had been incredibly supportive. "Mr. Nathan," she told me, "you've worked your entire life to build this wealth. It's time to enjoy it." The phone vibrated again. It was Martin, a new friend from the fishing club. "Nathan, you ready for dinner?" "I'll be there in 20-inch ready and waiting, Martin." I went inside to change, putting on a bright, comfortable shirt I never would have dared to wear in Wilmington. Here, I was just Nathan, a new resident who liked to fish and work with wood. Martin arrived right on time, an energetic man in his early 70s with a booming laugh and a zest for life. He was a widower like me, and we had bonded over shared stories and a love for the sea. Over dinner at a small seafood joint, we talked about my upcoming trip. "Make sure you try the red snapper in Key West," he advised. "And don't be afraid to haggle for better bait at the docks." It's part of the game. I listened with a smile, marveling at the contrast between my past and present. A year ago, a conversation like this would have seemed impossible. "What about your daughter?" Martin asked suddenly. "Still no word." I sighed. "No. And I don't expect any." "Her loss," Martin shrugged. "My wife always used to say, you raise your children for the world, not for yourself. Your daughter is living her life, and you have every right to live yours." After dinner, we walked along the waterfront. "In 3 days, I'll be on a boat just like that, but bigger," I said, gesturing to a charter vessel. "And that's just the start," Martin winked. "After the Gulf, there's Alaska, the Amazon." I laughed. "Let's get through this trip first." Back home, I double-checked my packing list. Everything was ready. My thoughts drifted back to Alara one last time. According to Leo, Julian had taken a job with a smaller firm, a step down in his career. He was quieter now, Leo had said, less arrogant. Perhaps the humbling experience had taught him something. Or perhaps that was just a father's hope. Either way, I had decided that his life would no longer define mine. I took out the old photo album, the only thing besides my clothes I had brought from Wilmington. I found the picture of Clara, me, and a tiny Julian on the beach. "I hope you'd approve, my love," I whispered. "I hope you'd agree that I deserve this." Tomorrow was my last day of preparations. And in 3 days, I would be standing on the deck of a fishing boat, watching the shoreline fade away as a vast ocean of possibility opened up before me. My own life. For the first time, the thought filled me not with guilt, but with anticipation. Stepping out onto the porch one last time before bed, I breathed in the salty night air. A sense of profound peace washed over me. "Thank you," I whispered, to fate, or maybe just to myself. Thank you for this second chance. At 67, I was finally living. And there was so much more to see.